Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I took a break last week and I skipped 1048 for two reasons, personal reasons obviously, but then also just because honestly not much happened in 1048. So that'll be like a really quick recap, so I decided to just combine them both into this video. So in 1048, it was a pretty, I don't want to say dry chapter, but I think 1049 was the chapter that a lot of people thought 1048 would be. For the most part, only two things really happened in 1048. Number one, we got to see Kaido's flaming Bagua, which looks really cool, and I think most people expected that there was going to be some sort of resistance from Kaido. He wasn't going to literally just sit there and take the attack head on. He was either going to hit Luffy's fist or have some sort of attack or defense to try and combat this attack that Luffy is sending down. Otherwise, like I said in a previous video, a lot of people were expecting that Kaido would get hit and then, you know, awaken or unleash some type of new power. It makes more sense that he does it before he actually gets hit, so that way when he does, we know he does now, you know that he's completely spent. You know that everything that he had, he's given. He pulled out all the stops. He pulled out the one final great, attack, and it didn't work. So now that makes more sense. The second thing that happened in 1048 was a guy who I'm very tired of talking about already, along with Kanjuro, and most of the scabbards, honestly. But Orochi. Orochi had his head cut off. Again. This time by Denjiro, who was coming to essentially rescue Hiyori. I don't know what this means anymore. I don't know if it means anything. I don't know if Orochi's actually dead. I'm assuming this is the one that's going to actually kill him for two reasons. One, I'm pretty sure Denjiro actually used Haki on his blade. And also because Orochi's still on fire. He transformed in the last chapter, 1047, as sort of a last-ditch effort to not survive, but to essentially take Hiyori with him to the grave. He was saying they were going to die together. But now Hiyori has been saved by Denjiro. Orochi has had his head cut off. It seemed like there is a certain amount of recovery time that Orochi needs after he gets his head cut off before he's back up and running around and being Orochi. But because he's still on fire, I don't think he's going to have that time. So I think him getting his head cut off is what's going to incapacitate him, but the fire is what's going to actually kill him. So hopefully Orochi's dead. Fingers crossed. But other than that, that's pretty much all that happened in 1048. Nothing super significant. I will say through 1048 and 1049, I've noticed something that is kind of an issue in One Piece. Most people just ignore it. It bothers me though, just from a continuity perspective, and that's scale. If you go back to 1047 and you look at the size of Luffy's fist compared to the island and compared to Kaido, it looks way bigger than it does in 1048 and 1049. Like, I don't know why it's so much smaller now. Honestly, it doesn't even look like it would destroy Onigashima anymore. It's like 3/4 of the size of Onigashima. It's not bigger than Onigashima anymore. I don't know if this is an actual story thing that's going to be explained or even relevant, or if this is just an issue with the art style and scale. Oda has had issues with scale, plenty of issues with scale in the past. Like I said, most people just ignore it. It kind of bothers me because it makes it a little bit harder to get an accurate grasp on just how big things actually are compared to other things. I guess it's whatever, but that was something that kind of immediately as soon as I saw it, I was just like, what is this? What's happening? So that kind of bothers me. That kind of stuff is it's a little important to me. But again, I'm probably in the minority. Like I said, most people care. Most people don't care. But besides that, that's not really, there's not really much else that happens in 1048. The cover story, also nothing really happens. We just see Cracker and Brule chilling in a room next to a big mirror. I guess that was to let us know that Cracker is back, or he's fully recovered, I guess. But again, how many of us actually cared about that? Speaking of actually caring, 1049. So 1049, like I said, was the chapter that I think most people expected 1048 to be. However, it still didn't quite live up to what most people wanted. So for instance, it starts with a cover story. We're seeing that Yonji and Ichiji, yeah, I think those are the ones who were captured by the Big Mom Pirates. The prison book that they were in is being burned. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing that happened with Luffy and Nami when they were in prison back in Whole Cake Island. But the book is being burned and they're escaping. They're kind of just like, oh, what's going on? Like they don't really seem to care. They're just like, oh, I guess we're free. Typical, German stuff. But then we actually get to see the impact of Luffy and Kaido's clash. And like I said, not quite as impactful, no pun intended, because if you look at the panel, if you look at the first little panel that they show of Luffy and Kaido clashing, Luffy's fist is so tiny. Like it's tiny compared, it looks like a regular Gear 4th King Kong gun. Like it doesn't look that big compared to what it looked like before. And even when we see it actually clashing with Kaido looks bigger than him. And if we know that Kaido can, I'm sorry, I'm just stuck on this. Like the scale thing is just, I don't know, it bothers me. But anyway, because Kaido's flaming Bago is so hot, Luffy can't touch it. So he has to use Ryo in addition to his regular armament haki, and I'm assuming Conqueror's haki as well. I'm seeing black lightning shoot off the fist, so there's got to be some Conqueror's haki in there as well. So that kind of negates the whole flaming Bago thing. So now Kaido's pretty much just physically resisting the punch. He's just flying up into it, trying to essentially push it back. And there's just, they're clashing. And then we get what most fans, myself included, have been waiting for, which is the Kaido flashback. However, it's not what we wanted. It's not even as fleshed out as Momo's flashback. Like it's a montage of key moments in Kaido's life. It's not a true flashback that I think most people wanted. It's not like Big Mom's flashback when we saw her growing up in Elbaf, when we saw her literally, get her devil fruit and all that. It's, not like a, Straw Hat flashback where we saw with Nami or Frankie or anything like that. It's literally just a montage of almost clips of Kaido's life. It doesn't really explain anything. It doesn't give us really any more context into who Kaido is as a person and how he actually became the way he has, as far as the things he knows, right? And I think I'm assuming part of the reason why that is because most people theorize and believe that most of what Kaido knows has actually come from his time with rocks. So by giving up where Kaido learned some of the things that he's learned, you are then giving more exposition onto who Rocks is. And a lot of people will speculate that is going to come at a later date, because some people think Rocks might be Eam. Some people think Rocks might still be alive. Some people think Rocks might be, hiding out somewhere. It's not really clear what happened to Rocks. Therefore, once that is given, we'll probably get more exposition on how Rocks and the members of the Rocks crew came about the information that they did, including Kaido. But for the most part, like I said, it's just like a little quick series of bits and pieces of Kaido's life. We see that he was a kid in what was called the Vodka Kingdom, or Kingdom of Vodka. Their nation was always at war, looting and pillaging to, make enough money to make the heavenly tribute to the celestial dragons. Kaido was super strong from a very, very early age, very obvious, just like Big Mom, larger than average. He essentially grew too unruly for them to control because he was so strong, but he was also a kid, and he was just super, all over the place. And what's interesting is that his kingdom tried to sell him, basically give him up to the world government, which was the exact same thing that we saw Mother Caramel doing, or about to do with Big Mom, right? People apparently take powerful, exceptional children and just give or sell them to the world government, which is really interesting because that's something that makes you question how some of the really strong members of the Marines came to actually be a part of the Marines. Did they all actually enlist or volunteer, or were some of them, like some of the members of the Giant Unit, or some of the even vice admirals or even admirals, were some of them sort of just given to the world government because they were so strong? Even Garp, we still don't really know when, where, or why Garp decided to join the Marines. I'm sure it'll be explained at some point, but or maybe not. But this practice of selling children to the world government is something that I think is going to come up again, not just in the form of flashbacks, but possibly as something that maybe is still going on. But Kaido, they sell him to the world government. He escapes. We already know Kaido has been captured and escaped multiple times. In this chapter, they actually explain that Kaido would get himself caught on purpose when he got bored, just so he could escape out of Navy prison ships, or out of Navy, custody. Eventually, he finds his way to the Pirate Island Beehive. He gets recruited by Whitebeard, actually, to come join the Rocks Pirates. He is on the Rocks Pirates. He meets Big Mom. He meets, all the other guys. So one thing that was interesting is there's just one panel during this little flashback thing for Kaido. But it's during his time with the Rocks Pirates, and it looks like it's actually after they were defeated on God Valley. And it's not quite a conversation, but we see Big Mom, young Big Mom, screaming, "Don't screw with me, where the hell did you go, Kaido?" Which, for me, could relate to two things, possibly. Either A, Kaido and Rocks went somewhere, which is where they got that information that they now have about Joy Boy and the Void Century and all that kind of stuff, because Kaido seems, again, very knowledgeable. Or the devil fruit that Kaido has, the fish fruit model Azure Dragon, which Big Mom said she actually gave to him. From this, it could suggest that Kaido actually stole it. He just took it and left. Who knows? But for whatever reason, Kaido went somewhere and Big Mom was very upset about it. I'm assuming it has something to do with the devil fruit, but it's very possible that it has something to do with Rocks, or even where or how Kaido managed to get the information that he has on the Void Century. We also see that at some point Kaido actually met, I can never remember her name, but the old Korizumi lady who also kind of got in Orochi's head and made him, start his whole plan. She sort of seems to be the one who got into Kaido's head as well, and basically convinced him to start this whole, war. Basically, like his idea of starting a war, sort of against the world government, or just a war that will turn the world upside down. It seems that this was sort of partly her idea that she sort of gave to Kaido, along with possibly the idea of a weapons fact, because she says, weapons shape the world we live in. She says this to Kaido. At some point, she went to go meet him, and it looks like at this point, Kaido already has King and Queen with him. It's not really clear whether or not this is on Wano. It just kind of jumps from that scene with Big Mom after God Valley straight to Kaido in some sort of reception hall with the early members of the Beast Pirates, and this old lady, the old Korizumi lady, is talking to him, giving him, these ideas about war and making weapons and stuff. And then from there, it flashes forward again to what I'm assuming is the banquet hall of Onigashima. But it says that when she first shows up, she says to Kaido, 10 years have passed since that incident. I'm assuming she's talking about God Valley, which would make this approximately, I want to say maybe 30 years ago, which would put it close to around the time that Odin actually left. So, it's not really. It would put it close to the time that Oden left, which we know also coincides with Whitebeard arriving to the island. Right, Whitebeard starting his own crew. So it becomes pretty clear that this old Kurozumi lady, she put these plans into motion for quite a while. Now, one thing that I am a little bit not confused about, but would like to know is where exactly is this conversation happening? Is it happening on Wano, or is it happening somewhere else? Because that would suggest that this lady actually has the ability to just leave Wano and come back as she wants, which you're not supposed to be able to do. So that's interesting. But if it's on Wano, that would suggest that Kaido was on Wano either immediately after Whitebeard left or at the same time Whitebeard got there. It's kind of hard to figure out. I would have to go back and sort of do some of the numbers as far as like when these things are happening. They give like little brief timestamps, like when Kaido's in his kingdom. It's about 46 years ago when he kind of gets sold to the world government initially. And then 44 years ago, 2 years later, is when he essentially joins Rocks. There's not really any explanation as far as like how long he was with the Rocks pirates. If the God Valley incident was about 40 years ago, that would mean that he was only with Rocks for about 4 years. Yeah, so this would mean that Kaido, this was about 30 years ago, which is weird because like I said, that would place it a little bit before, actually, now that I think about it, probably before the time that Oden actually left. But I gotta look more into it and kind of do some of the numbers. But anyway, the flashback, like I said, is just a series of little clips that goes from when Kaido's a kid all the way up until what I'm assuming is fairly recently. And we see a conversation between Kaido and King where King actually says, or I'm sorry, Kaido actually says that Yamato mentioned Joy Boy. So this is probably, you know, after Yamato has already found Oden's logbook and has read through it possibly a couple times. Kaido is unaware of it because he says that he's not sure how that brat learned that name. But of course, by now, Kaido already knows about Joy Boy. What Kaido says here is actually pretty interesting. He says, if Joy Boy is the same man that you're waiting for, King, then I know who he is. Now, what Kaido says next isn't actually all that important or interesting, but that's important. He says if Joy Boy is the man that you're waiting for, King. Now, this is important because we know that King's race was essentially wiped out by the world government. So it would make sense that Joy Boy would be someone that King would see as some sort of retribution or salvation for what happened to his people, right? The possibility of overthrowing the world government, which is pretty much the idea of the Sun God Nika and Joy Boy and what most other people see as like who Joy Boy is and what he stands for. That makes perfect sense that would be something that King would be interested in, or you know, would want, someone that King would want to follow. And it would also make sense why he ended up following Kaido, because I'm sure he at some point saw the potential of Kaido being that person. However, over time, it seems like Kaido sort of lost that ambition, or maybe he lost his way or the joyful nature that he once had, which actually, looking back at this flashback, it doesn't seem like Kaido ever really had much of a joyfulness about him. It seemed like the only time that he was ever really happy was when he was beating somebody up, or just finished beating somebody up, or was about to beat somebody up. You know, he doesn't walk around like super happy or smiling or anything like that. He's really, I would say, closer to what we see in like Zoro. Like Zoro laughs and he, you know, has fun sometimes, but for the most part, he's a pretty serious guy. That's kind of what we're seeing from Kaido here. Even when they show him as a kid, like he looks pissed. Like he just looks angry all the time. Kaido has had resting bitch face since he was 5. So yeah, or 10, excuse me. That's the earliest we see him here. So I think, you know, Kaido, I think, is not only starting to realize himself that he isn't Joy Boy, but also he's realizing that, you know what, if there is a Joy Boy, then he's probably going to have to be someone who's like me, but better than me. Right? And he tells King that. He says, you know, if Joy Boy is the same man that you're waiting for, then I know who he is. And King says, who is it? And you know, Kaido essentially sets himself up as sort of a gatekeeper by saying, you know, Oden wanted to open up Wano to welcome Joy Boy, but he knows that he's taken over Wano and he's never opening it up because it's his territory. He doesn't want people coming and going as they please. So he says, you know, if there is a Joy Boy and he does come here, Joy Boy will be the man who defeats me. You know, that was pretty interesting. That conversation was probably the most interesting part of Kaido's flashback, in all honesty. But like I said, it's not quite what we wanted as fans. We wanted something a little bit more fleshed out. It's more similar to what we got with Big Mom's flashback. But who knows? Maybe that'll come a little later. But, you know, a quick montage of like some key moments in Kaido's life is not what we wanted. I think for the most part, when you think of a flashback, especially in One Piece, it doesn't even need to be a large portion of a person's life. It just needs to be the most important event, the most important couple of weeks, months, or years of their life. And that's not really what we get here with Kaido's flashback. It almost seems like a here you go, this will hold you over for now type of thing for the fans. And then after that, it pretty much progresses the way we thought that the story would progress naturally in 1048, which is the punch actually hits, Kaido gets sent flying. We also see the rest of the water. Like, this is all happening around the same time. The water that Jinbei and Raizo sent through the castle is, you know, getting rid of all the flames and things like that. And at the same time, Kaido gets, you know, he takes the punch from Luffy. Here's something interesting. It looks like Momo succeeded in moving the island. He seems to have succeeded at creating the flame clouds, but it's not quite clear as to whether or not he moved it. But either way, when Luffy's punch lands, he doesn't hit the island. As small as his fist is right now, it doesn't seem like it would matter much, but that's just me nitpicking, I guess. But he, you know, Luffy hits Kaido, he knocks him back down to the ground, he lands on the surface of Wano. It's hard to tell whether it's the ocean or not, because he's still in like his flaming Bagua. When he hits the ground, there's a lot of smoke and steam, as well as the flame clouds, because Momonosuke has lowered the island. He generated the flame clouds and he sort of lowered the island down to the ground, so it's kind of unclear. There's like a cliff in the background. It's kind of unclear whether they just landed off the coast of like the flower capital, or if they landed somewhere like in the forest or like the middle of nowhere, like, you know, on actual Wano, but far enough away that they won't land on anybody, because everybody's at the flower capital for the festival anyway. But yeah, that's the end of the chapter. Kaido is on the ground. His tongue is sticking out. He looks... Well, actually, is that Kaido or is that Momo? No, that's Momo. So Momo... They show a quick shot of Momo and Luffy basically laying down. They're exhausted. They're spent. And that's kind of it, right? Like, we... you know, that's all we really get to see of, you know, the punch and the aftermath and all that. So it's over. The fight's over. Morge, I'm sorry, but the raid appears to have been successful. I'm not gonna say it's anticlimactic. I think this is something that the anime is going to handle flawlessly. I think they're gonna kill it with this episode. But as far as execution in the manga, I think it's a little lackluster. Both the flashback and the actual resolution of this whole fight. I think most people just expected something a little bit more fleshed out, a little bit more grandiose, but you know, nonetheless, it still looks really cool, but just not what we were expecting. So let me know in the comments if what you thought about the chapter, if it lived up to your expectations, if it fell short. Personally, I think I'm sort of in line with the other fans that it sort of fell short a little bit for me, but still great nonetheless. I don't dislike Wano. Wano is definitely one of my favorite arcs so far. It's been given a lot of chances to do that for a lot of people because it's so long, so you can pack in a lot of really great moments. But I am excited to sort of move the story along a little bit. I felt this way worse in Whole Cake Island, of course, but I think the difference is Whole Cake Island, reading it week to week was hard, but if you're binging Whole Cake Island is a whole different experience than when we were reading it week to week. And I think Wano's kind of the same way. If you were to go back and binge the whole Wano arc, either in the manga or the anime, once it's actually over, it will feel a lot different than it did week to week, which is just something that us week to week readers and reviewers kind of just have to deal with. But it is what it is.